Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I forgot my little paper again. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Bad Moon Rising by Jonathan Maberry from, what does that say? Kensington Fiction. And this is the third and final book in the Pine Deep trilogy. For those who pay attention, I don't know if anyone will notice, these reviews are going to be a little out of order. Not the Pine Deep reviews, just my reviews in general. Because a couple days ago, Saturday, I recorded a whole bunch of reviews. The first of which was Dead Man's Song, the second book in the Pine Deep trilogy. And then I recorded a few more. But since I was able to finish this in time, this is going to jump ahead of the other books so that the review for this follows the review for Dead Man's Song. You got that? Following along? Does anybody care? I don't know. But anyway, Bad Moon Rising. So, let's see. Do I need to recap the first two books? It all takes place in Pine Deep. In the first book, we meet our cast of characters. Crow, Val, Saul Weinstock, Mike Sweeney, Vic Wingate, Tow Truck Eddie, good guys and bad guys, and Pine Deep is the most haunted town in America, and they play that up every Halloween. And this guy, Carl Ruger, he's a sociopath. He and a couple Confederates are on the run from a drug deal gone bad. And they crash in Pine Deep, and there's a ghost, and there's an ancient evil, and now there's this human evil that gets all involved, and stuff happens. And then in the second book, we pick up right where the first book left off, and some people are killed, and a lot of our characters are in the hospital, and the evil is rising, different things happening. We see the good guys figuring out what's going on, and the bad guys consolidating their power, and more craziness ensues. So then we get to book 3. And let me see, you know what? I just finished it, but I didn't just start it, so... Okay, yeah, this is the one. So the second book didn't really have a recap of the first book, but in the first few chapters, as we're reintroduced to our characters, they're all sort of, for lack of a better word, reminiscing about the events of the first book. But in this one, we have 2 introductions. Again, I'm going to see. Is the first one? Yes. So Bad Moon Rising, an introduction. And then that's followed by, it's an author's note from 2008. This edition is some year. I don't know. 2017, so 9 years. And anyway, so in the author's note, we get a recap of the previous 2 books. But then, once the book itself actually starts, there are newspaper articles that really give us some pretty good details about the events of the previous 2 books. And then we get into the story itself with more people in the hospital. Our poor heroes. And the first 2/3 of the book are, again, our heroes figuring things out. Finally, a couple of the characters talk and hash things out. One of my only 2 complaints about the first book was that one character kept telling another character, "We need to talk," and then they'd put it off. And then they'd either talk on the phone or meet in person, and the guy would say, "We need to talk," but then they'd put it off. Well, they finally talk. And more consolidation of bad guy power until the final third of the book, which is just insanity. Almost nonstop action for that final third of the book. It is crazy, and some of the best scenes I've ever read. One in particular, I'm not going to go into it, but there's one scene in particular that I absolutely loved because of how far the author went. Let's see. A little more detail, I guess. This takes place... Let's see. All right, I have to look. Get past this part. And, okay, so we start at October 14th, and then by the end of the book, not counting the epilogue, we go through Halloween. So the second half of October. The first book started, I think, at the very end of September. So these 3 books, almost 1,500 pages, possibly more, basically just encompass a single October. So there's, even with all this craziness going on, these murders, Pine Deep is still planning on having their big Halloween celebration. Basically, it's a farming community, and so through most of the year, their income is from farming, but then come October, it's all tourist dollars. They have a huge haunted hayride and movies and special guests and all this craziness. But in particular, this year there was a blight on the crops, so the only thing that's going to save the town financially is the Halloween celebration. So they have to keep it going. Crow, our main guy, brings in some extra security because by this point they've figured out what's going on, but they, what's the point in stopping the evil if the town itself is just destroyed financially? So they're hoping that they can stop it and still save the town from financial ruin. So let's see. I don't want to go into too much more detail. There are a bunch of celebrity guests, and Jonathan Maberry mentions that he reached out to these people to make sure it was okay to put them in the book and everything. So there's, I think he mentions them all early on, maybe even in the author's note or the introduction. So I don't feel bad mentioning their, like Tom Savini, makeup expert Tom Savini, James Gunn, writer of the Dawn of the Dead remake, writer-director of Slither. So those are kind of his horror bona fides. Also worked for Troma back in the day, wrote Romeo and Juliet. Possibly best known at this point for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and the Suicide Squad movie. But a horror dude. And Ken Foree, who starred in the original Dawn of the Dead. He's in one of the Texas Chainsaw sequels, number 3, I believe. And From Beyond, all sorts of stuff. Another great actor. There's the director of The Grudge and The Grudge 2. Don't remember his name right off the top of my head. I think I do, but I don't want to mess it up, so we'll just say I don't remember. And, Brink Stevens and Debbie Rochon, a couple of wonderful scream queens. I wonder how they feel about that title. So they're there, and I feel like I'm forgetting some people. But anyway, so you have these real-life celebrities that are in the book, which is fun. Some great scenes with them. So, as with the first 2 books, wonderfully written, wonderful characters. I love Crow and Val and Mike and Newton, the reporter that we're introduced to in the second book, and we get a new character, Jonathan Corbiel. I'm not sure how you say her name, who's like a folklore expert that they contact, and she comes to town to help them out. Wonderful character. And the bad guys, again, love to hate them. That's tough. Hate them. Straight up hate them. I don't know if I love to hate them, because that's almost implies some admiration. I don't know. But they're horrible people, the bad guys. Lots of twists and turns. Again, if I had to complain about something, it does on occasion get a little bit repetitive. But again, that could be the author trying to really hammer home this stuff. And this is over 500 pages long. But overall, just compelling, fantastic. We've got character growth. We've got twists and turns and horrific things happening. And just, again, that explosive last third is mind-blowing. So I gave it 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. Easily. Just a fantastic series. I can see someday, if I have the time, going back and rereading this. There are other stories that take place in Pine Deep. I have at least one other novel, Ink, that takes place in the town, and Jonathan Maberry just recently on Facebook and possibly other places posted a list of all of his fiction, I think. So it lists any short stories that take place in Pine Deep. I saved it so that I have access to it and can check these things. But, man, is there anything else really to say about this? I don't want to give anything at all away. I highly, highly recommend the entire series. It's absolutely fantastic, and the ending is just mind-blowing. Excuse me. And there is an epilogue, which is going to be part of my question. But first, I have to think if there's anything else I need to say. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink while I'm thinking about this. Well-written, compelling, wonderful characters. Even the real people that are in it. Excuse me. Twists and turns. Man, it's at times. If this were a movie, there are scenes where people would be jumping up out of their seats and cheering, and scenes, I think, where the theater would be dead quiet except for the sniffling from the heartbreak, and scenes of sounds, you'd hear the sounds of repulsion, or that when something horrific happens. Just runs the gamut of emotions. Yeah, just fantastic. I again, wanted to get this recorded, so I'm doing it. It's Tuesday evening, and I wanted to get it done, get it posted. It'll go up on Friday. So today is Tuesday, the October 19th. So this will go up on Friday, October, what is that date? I can't see, 22nd. And the second book, Dead Man's Song, went up yesterday. That's as of this time that I'm recording. So book 2 was on Monday, book 3 will be on Friday. Book 2 has a link to my review from the first book from years ago. Man, I feel like a fool now for having waited so long to finish reading this. Just fantastic. Absolutely amazing. All right. That'll bring me to my question. I mentioned there's an epilogue in this book. And relatively recently, it has come to my attention that some people don't read prologues and epilogues and introductions, things like that. I think just this morning I saw somebody on Twitter say they read everything. If it's printed in the book, they're reading it. I assume they don't mean the copyright page, but I had no idea that there were people who didn't read these things. I mean, a prologue and an epilogue are part of the story. It might not be the most important part, but it could be important, especially the prologue. The epilogue, I could see maybe someone being like, well, the story's over. I don't need, the main part of the story's over. Like, this could have literally ended before the epilogue. Kind of abrupt, but that could have been the ending. I like an epilogue like this, but I read everything. I actually, long time ago, decades and decades ago, I was dating a young woman who, well, one, she said only stupid people read. But before that, I was reading something, and I was reading the introduction, and she asked me why I was reading the introduction. It's not important. It's not part of the book. I'm like, well, that's just crazy. So, the question is, I don't think I got to the question yet, do you read introductions, author's notes, prologues, epilogues, this kind of stuff? Acknowledgments, we'll even throw that in. I read all of it. I was listening recently to the Ghost Writers podcast with Mary Sangiovanni, Summer Cannon, Matt Wilderson, and they were talking about this sort of thing, and I believe it was Mary who said she had sent in a manuscript to a publisher that had a prologue, and they asked her to change the prologue to chapter 1 and then renumber all the other chapters because people don't read prologues, so just make that chapter 1. And I believe she said she did because it wasn't that important. They weren't asking her to change the story, but it's just crazy to me that people don't read that stuff. A lot of prologues, I find, are sort of what I like to call the cold open. It's that scene before the credits, which of course you get more in TV than necessarily in movies. I've watched a few movies relatively recently that just started with the credits. I think of the prologue sort of generally is that cold open. Sometimes could easily be a first chapter. Sometimes it's something that takes place in the past and is sort of setting things up. Sometimes it might be maybe a history lesson of what you're going to be, the place or the things you're going to be reading about. So that's my question. Do you read that stuff? I do. That's my answer. But everybody has their thing, I guess. I essentially, if there's maybe 1 or 2 pages of blurbs, I'll tend to read those. If there's like 5 pages, I don't read all 5 pages of blurbs. Sometimes I'll look through all of the pages and either find an author that I like and see what they had to say, or a newspaper, like if it's got the Cleveland Plain Dealer, because that's, the local big paper. I'll check that out, but I'm not reading 5 pages of blurbs. I don't read the copyright page, although sometimes I look it over for information. Like, as you saw, I just did to see when this edition of the book was published. But other than that, I read the whole thing. I read the introduction and the author's note and the, does he call it acknowledgments at the end? Yeah, the acknowledgments. And there's an afterword from 2008. I read all of that. Anyway, there you go. That was rather long-winded. Bad Moon Rising, Jonathan Maberry, 3rd book in the Pine Deep trilogy, 5 out of 5 stars. Highly recommended. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, board games, comic books, and fuzzy animals. That's in a different order than I usually do it. But anyway, my Instagram is EricSmith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH5757. That's all I've got for you. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, And until next time, read more books.